So racism exists in the world. No one's going to dispute that. Whenever a white person called the cops on a black person, they're automatically deemed racist. They're racist, working for the man, out to get black people, put them behind bars and make them statistic. Or worse, want them to die at the hands of police brutality. Well, that seems to be the case as well in another racially driven incident out in San Francisco, California, where resident and YouTube employee Christopher Kukor proceeded to call the cops on an African American man by the name of Wesley Michelle. Even with Kukor's elementary age son saying, "Daddy, let's go. I think he's right. I don't like this. Please, let's go." And with Wesley telling him, "You're going to be the next guy on TV. Listen to your son." Was this incident nothing more than a racist white man calling the cops on a black man simply because he was black, as the media likes to portray? Or was Christopher Kukor's reasoning justified? I'm going to give my perspective and my thoughts on this seemingly common occurrence in America on this episode of Q's Views. So Christopher Kukor proceeded to call the police on Wesley Michelle. But why? A post on Instagram from the Shade Room provided a more elaborate story on the occurrence. And according to the Shades Room report, Christopher Kukor is making headlines for calling the cops on a black man waiting for a friend outside of an apartment building. Now, Kukor says his actions have nothing to do with the man's race. According to the New York Post, Kukor expresses his regrets about the situation, saying race did not prompt him to call the police on Wesley Michelle. Unfortunately, this is a terrible pattern of people calling authorities regarding people of their color for no other reason than their race, Christopher says in a statement. The last thing I ever intended to do was echo that history. As we previously reported, a viral video shows Kukor calling the police on Wesley, accusing him of trespassing on private property. Kukor's son is in the video begging his father to leave Wesley alone. Kukor continues with his 911 call as Wesley explains he's waiting for a friend to arrive. Shortly after, Wesley's friend arrives, and Kukor seems surprised. After experiencing backlash on social media, Kukor explains his instincts led him to call the police because of being robbed in the past. Like many in San Francisco, I live in a building with a security call box, and residents in the building count on that security measure, he explains. I noticed Wesley Michelle caught the door and entered the building without using the call box. I did what came naturally and asked him where was he going. I want to be clear on this point. This is something I do regularly, regardless of who the person is. Despite Wesley's explanation, Kukor insists on requesting Wesley call his friend on the call box. He says the precaution is necessary to protect his children and those that live in the building. My father was murdered outside his home by a trespasser who he confronted alone, he says. I've encountered trespassers in my building, and we've been robbed several times. I'm sorry my actions caused Wesley to feel unfairly targeted due to his race. You don't have to apologize, bro. First, let me say this about this whole situation. Kukor's point was completely understandable. I mean, how many of us are completely comfortable with a stranger present on our property when we haven't seen them before? How many of us would be completely understanding of a stranger's word when they tell us their motives? I mean, we can't read people's minds. And only the individual who has no ill intent knows that they have no ill intent. When we experience something as traumatic as losing a loved one to a violent act, we tend to become even more on guard, even if we're irrational about it. When our property has been robbed multiple times, it tends to consciously raise our awareness of any activity out of the norm or any unfamiliar person on the premises that looks remotely suspicious. It's simple human nature. And what Christopher Kukor was exhibiting in this incident was just that. Now, was there a bit of implicit bias? Absolutely. I'm sure there was. But was it racism? I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to stretch it and say that it was. I mean, this idea that every time a white person calls the cops on a black person for absolutely no other reason than them being black, that's nonsense. It's a fact that over 50% of violent crimes in the U.S. are committed by African Americans. And it's the fact that you've already experienced losing a loved one and being robbed before So of course you're going to want to take every precautionary action to avoid history repeating itself. Anyone would. I think we can all agree to that. When you see suspicious activity or suspicious people and you feel uncomfortable, or someone is somewhere they shouldn't be or have never been seen before, you're supposed to report it because you don't know what that person is capable of. Anyone would. Please, let's stop acting like this is a white and black thing. This is a human thing. The difference is white people aren't scared to call the cops, and black people sit and wait for things to happen and try to take matters into their own hands, and is often to no avail, might I add. But whether Wesley Michelle was waiting for his friend or not, he was an unfamiliar face. The moment he entered that building without using that call box, he was trespassing. It's a private property. You aren't a resident. You don't live there. And when Kukor proceeded to question him, he was well within his right to do so. And on top of that, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't cuss him out. He didn't insult him. He didn't pull out a gun and tell him to put his hands up. And he didn't do any of that. He didn't make any racist remarks. We're so quick to jump to this racist rhetoric when there's always valid reasons evident. Do you know how annoying that is in America? For me personally, to hear that, to hear black folks take it and run with it and say racism, racism, racism every time. No. How about you doing something that you ain't have no damn business doing? But apparently it's wrong for a white person to call the cops on someone if they black. And it's wrong for a white person to question someone black. And it's wrong for a white person to be scared, uncomfortable, or suspicious of an unknown person on their premises if they're black. Let me give you guys an example of the reality of what's going on here with this operant conditioning. When someone sees a loose Rottweiler or pit bull, they don't run up to it and pet it. They get uncomfortable and they steer clear. Why is that? Because Rottweilers and pit bulls are responsible for the most dog attacks and fatalities on human beings. Yeah, the dog could be innocent. The dog could be nice as hell. But we don't know that. And we can't tell just by looking at it. All we know is that it's a potential threat. And that it's potentially dangerous. And we want to take the necessary precautions to stay out of harm's way. But the difference is, dogs can't talk. So we can't ask dogs, hey, what you doing there, buddy? Do you live here? You're not going to bite me, are you? We can't do that. And of course, Rottweilers and Pit Bulls both make excellent family companions, but they still claim lives and hurt people. Whether it's a result of bad ownership or not, they still do it. And when we see a loose Rottweiler or Pit Bull in close proximity to us, we're not thinking about if the owner was a good owner or not. And we're not thinking about the possibility that, oh, Pit Bulls scored higher than Golden Retrievers on the family companion test. We ain't thinking about that. We know Pit Bulls bite. And we know Rottweilers bite. And we know they claim lives. We want to get the hell out the way. And that's similar to what society perceives about African American, especially African American men. Especially when they're in unfamiliar territory alone. I mean, we aren't innately bad people, but as a result of poor parenting, just like dogs and poor owners, we commit violent acts of crime. And it seemingly occurs often in America. It's like the little Albert experiment with John B. Watson when he conditioned little Albert to associate the rat with bad. The little boy cried every time a rat was presented to him because of the noise that they made every time the rat was presented to him. The little boy thought that he didn't like the noise. So every time they presented the rat, poor little boy, he start crying. He busts out crying. It's the same thing. It's human nature. We've evolved to fear things that can harm us. And when we know something is capable of harming us, we try to avoid it. We know what situations look like when there is potential danger. We try to avoid it. We do it with dogs. We do it with snakes. We do it with bees. We do it with cars. We do it with people in the club. When they have guns, we get the hell out. We do it with the school bully. We walk past him. We try to avoid him. We hide in the locker. We hide in the bathroom. We do whatever to avoid him. Because we ain't trying to get hurt. We ain't trying to get beat up. We do it with our parents when we get in trouble. We ain't trying to get no whooping. We know the belt coming. We all take whatever action is necessary to minimize the risk of us getting hurt. Christopher Cukor did the right thing. The way he handled this situation, he calmly insisted that the guy use the call box. What more can you ask for? Before he called the cops. But since Wesley didn't want to cooperate, he proceeded to call the cops. Like I said, he didn't make any racist remarks, and he didn't overtly exhibit racism. You handled the situation well, Christopher. I don't care what society or social media is saying. You handled the situation well. And as he stated, he's done it with everyone, not just this black guy. It's a shame that this man has to apologize for feeling uncomfortable with a random stranger entering his premises simply because people want to believe that it was racist more so than a precautionary action. I wouldn't have apologized. And plus, if someone being standoffish with me about their place on the premises I live on, after I've already experienced death and robbery, that would immediately be a red flag to me. So now you are getting into that red zone by being standoffish. You're making yourself a threat, because anyone who's standoffish is liable to do anything. That would immediately be a red flag to me. And that's often the problem with individuals in the black community. We seem to have this issue with compliance and ordinance and order, period, especially when there's authority present. We like big ass kids who know it all and can't be told what to do. And that's ridiculous. We want to go against the grain and be difficult. In turn, we just end up escalating situations and making it worse for ourselves as we try to play the victim, instead of looking at where we may have been at fault and opting to take an approach that doesn't have to result in the cops showing up, or someone getting hurt, or unfortunately someone losing their life. White people aren't always racist. Nah, y'all can't convince me of that. Some things we simply have no business doing. And if we're going to proceed to do whatever we want to do and expect to not to have to answer to anyone, we better be ready for whatever difficulties may transpire after that. Because we aren't entitled and we aren't above any other race. We aren't above the laws. And just because we're black and we have a history of being enslaved doesn't mean we can go about acting as if America owes us something and we're allowed to do whatever we want to do. No, we still have to follow the rules and regulations and the laws. It's really just that simple. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Q's Views. Everyone be blessed and have a safe, enjoyable evening.